U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel today, his fourth trip to the region since the Israel-Hamas war broke out October 7th. He's meeting today with Israeli President Isaac Herzog and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, America's top diplomat trying to keep the Israel-Hamas war from spreading across the region. Now, Blinken touched down in Tel Aviv late Monday after stops in 6 other countries. He says 4 key Arab nations and Turkey have now agreed to begin planning for the reconstruction and governance of Gaza once Israel's war against Hamas ends. Here's more of what Blinken had to say ahead of the talks today.
I will press on the absolute imperative to do more to protect civilians and to do more to make sure that humanitarian assistance is getting into the hands of those who need it. And we'll talk about how we see the future for the region and for Israel. And I'm convinced that there is a future path that can actually bring lasting peace and security for Israel, that can ensure that October 7th never happens again, and that can bring the region together, that can meet the aspirations of the Palestinian people, and do it in a way that makes this a region focused on the future.
We're going to break Blinken's trip down now with Kethevane Gorjestani, who joins me on set. Blinken's main goal here, Kethevane, is really to avoid an all-out regional war. Is he going to be successful?
Well, it's complicated, and that has been really the goal of the United States ever since the start of the war. But there is renewed urgency about avoiding escalation because of the growing tensions, whether it's in the Red Sea with the Houthis, whether it's in Syria, in Iraq, or now even more so with Lebanon, especially with Hezbollah. Last week, what is believed to have been an Israeli strike killed Hamas's number 2 in Lebanon in a Hezbollah stronghold. On Monday, there was a Hezbollah commander that was killed in the strike. And this morning, 3 members of Hezbollah believed to have been killed in a strike on their car. Israel does not say that it is them, but all of these strikes happened in Lebanon, on Lebanese soil. And Hezbollah has vowed to retaliate. And there has been a strike by Hezbollah on an Israeli command center near the border between Israel and Lebanon. And so these Israeli targeted killings and the reaction from Hezbollah and from these groups that are backed by Iran, of course, are increasing this idea that there is an escalation. And it's also sort of counter to the push by the Americans to try to contain this, to avoid that escalation. Meanwhile, the U.S. also pushing for a sort of change in tactic in the war in Gaza, to move from this intense war to a sort of more targeted approach. And while the Israelis have been saying that, yes, we're moving to a new phase of the war, the relentless bombing hasn't stopped. The number of dead every day hasn't really decreased. And Israel has made it clear that they will not stop until they have defeated Hamas and until all of the hostages have been returned and freed. And so the diplomacy of the United States, the pressure of the United States, is important, but whether it will be successful is a whole other story, unfortunately.
In the meantime, though, the U.S. Secretary of State is also trying to focus on working out what will happen after the war. And there are quite some disagreements on what that post-war future might look like.
Yes, he said that there is a different and much better future possible. So an optimistic tone, even though he did admit that there were some serious challenges to that. And now Blinken traveled to several Arab states before heading to Israel, and he brought the message to the Israelis that these Arab nations that he visited were ready to help rebuild Gaza, but with 2 requests. One is an end to the fighting in Gaza. 2 is the, quote, practical pathway to a Palestinian state, i.e. the 2-state solution. If you take these 2 points, Israel has said not going to stop the war until Hamas is defeated and hostages are released. So that's counter to ending the fighting in Gaza. And then the 2-state solution, well, Benjamin Netanyahu has been very clear that he's opposed to that. There's another piece of disagreement, this time even more so between Israel and the United States. And that is, of course, how future post-war Gaza will be run. The Americans want some sort of role for the Palestinian Authority, which is currently running the West Bank. And that has been also rejected by the Israelis without given another option for who would likely govern Gaza. So it's unclear really how much sway U.S. diplomacy has when it comes to the future of Gaza. But one thing is for certain is that so far the U.S. has not used the 2 main weapons hands, if you will, that they could have to put pressure on the Israelis, stopping selling arms to Israel, and of course stopping protecting Israel at the UN Security Council with that all-powerful U.S. veto.